The Saints season mercifully came to an end on Sunday in Tampa. It was a game that Tampa desperately needed to try to win and get into the playoffs. Turns out they didn't when the dust settled because the Falcons couldn't beat Carolina, but it appeared at the time that Tampa needed that game, and we're obviously going to give the Saints everything they wanted, and the Saints were just trying to play out the string here and see what they could do. And it turns out the Saints came out and played hard. They really did. They had a 2-score lead in the second half of the football game. I thought that Spencer Rattler looked good in the first half, looked comfortable in the first half. He did not turn the ball over, led some scoring drives. They weren't able to get touchdowns as often as I think they probably wanted to, but they were able to put some points on the board, and you look up and you got a 16-6 lead. I thought Rattler was a positive in the majority of this game, and I was kind of looking for positives before we get into the big picture stuff, as you well know. I thought Juwan Johnson had a really nice day on Sunday. He goes 6 catches for 80 yards. Actually had a nifty little move, make some guys miss, get up the field. And that's a guy that the Saints, I don't think, utilized as well as they could have this year. He and Foster Moreau, especially when you started losing your weapons on the outside. You got those two guys who've been pretty productive, and I just didn't think they were quite involved enough. Juwan Johnson certainly was on Sunday. Blake Grupe capped off what was a really nice year for Blake Grupe. He goes 4 for 4 on field goals. For the season, he was 27 of 31, and under 50 yards, he was 21 out of 23. That's good stuff. We know how quickly kickers got cycled through for a lot of the Peyton era. He kind of settled on Will Lutz, and then Lutz gets hurt, and he's kind of not what he used to be. And, okay, you kind of decide you're going to move on, and you go to this young rookie in Grupe last year, and that was a little uneven, if we're being honest. But this year, I thought he stepped up and really had a nice season, and that was capped with, again, a 4 for 4 effort in the game yesterday. And then I thought Jordan Howard made a nice play on the ball coming up for that interception. The Saints looked like they had a real chance to win the game, and I will give huge credit to Baker Mayfield for making 4 consecutive big-time 3rd and 4th down plays, extending drives. I mean, the touchdown pass he threw in the right corner of the end zone was a rocket down the right sideline, and then he takes off on a long 3rd down and runs for it up the middle of the field. I thought he did a really, really good job, and I'll be honest, as I'm watching Baker Mayfield play, it kind of looked like what a good version of Spencer Rattler could theoretically be. Now, it took Baker Mayfield a long time to mature into a good quarterback in the league, but maybe it's the pedigree, a little bit undersized, played for Lincoln Riley, threw for a lot of college yards. I'm not sure exactly, but obviously you had Mayfield as the first pick in the draft, and then you took Rattler in the 5th round. They're not the same in that way, but it's a good athlete with a big arm, not necessarily elite size, and came from kind of the same college system, and Mayfield has turned himself into a quality NFL quarterback. Could Spencer Rattler do that? I don't know. It's not really my job to know. The guy whose job it is to know is whoever takes the reins of the New Orleans Saints moving forward, and that is, quite frankly, what we're here to talk about. And I think anyone who's watched this over the last 2 months would suggest that Darren Rizzy made some changes when he came in. He stemmed the tide. They go out and they beat the Falcons at home in his first week. They beat the Browns. You do lose to the Rams, but you come back and go to New York and get a win. And all of a sudden, Darren Rizzy has won 3 of his 4 games as the interim coach. And at that point, it stands to reason, okay, let's look at this and see what he's doing right, and can he sustain this and get an opportunity to be the next head coach. And then you lose your last 4. And you got clipped in a real close one against Washington. You go to Green Bay in the freezing cold and get absolutely annihilated. And I thought the final nail in Darren Rizzy's head coaching coffin was the loss to the Raiders, where you really weren't all that competitive with a bad football team. And that's pretty evident. You play out the string against Tampa, and the guys played hard, and credit to them. But I don't think there's anybody who realistically is looking at this situation and going, Darren Rizzy needs to be the guy. There's got to be wholesale changes made. And here is where I'll kind of start with that, because we're going to talk about this for a couple of weeks until they do make this hire. Where I would start is whoever comes in to be the new head coach of the Saints needs to be given a lot of authority on how things work. Because the current administration, sans Sean Payton, in my estimation, has garnered almost no goodwill here. Like there's so much broken with this team, from the structure of the salary cap to the draft selections to the depth on the roster. The whole thing is busted. And whoever's next needs to be given his opportunity to fix it his way. And that's a very difficult thing to do when you start looking at pay grades with NFL executives and egos, and then you look around and you realize that a couple of guys in that front office were there when the Saints won a Super Bowl, and you're kind of going, well, these guys, and that needs to be the furthest thing from anyone in New Orleans' mind. The 2009 Super Bowl does not need to be on anybody's mind. The Nola no call needs to be on no one's mind. This is miles from that. And the new coach needs to be the guy with the loudest voice in the room. That's very difficult for people in those positions when I'm talking about Mickey Loomis and Dennis Lauscha and Kai Harley and Gail Benson and that whole group that's there. It's very difficult for those people to say, hey, this is the new guy. How can we help you? And that's what needs to happen. And it's not going to be Darren Rizzy, and reports are starting to surface now about who the Saints potentially would like to interview. Aaron Glenn being reported by Adam Schefter. You saw Matt Nagy's name come up from Diana Rossini on Saturday. And while I have my thoughts on those two candidates, and we'll assess all the candidates moving forward, what's more important to me than the actual candidate, whoever it is what that candidate's allowed to do when that candidate becomes the head coach. That's the baseline for this whole thing. Because the guy that takes this job needs to have the loudest voice in the room. My understanding, certainly I can't report it because I'm not there and I wasn't covering the team, my understanding is Sean Payton's voice is pretty damn loud. Now, he's a great coach, gotten the Broncos into the playoffs here with the rookie quarterback, but he wasn't a great coach. No one knew that when he got here, and all of a sudden you get that respect. The new guy needs to have it, because I don't think that Mickey Loomis and Dennis Lauscha and Kai Harley and the whole group, Ireland, and the whole group that have gotten the Saints into this mess need to be the leading force in getting them out of the mess. And if this doesn't reinforce that it's a mess, I don't know what does, because this was a disaster of a football season. You lose 7 games in a row in the middle of the season. You lose 5 out of 6 to finish the season. It was terrible. And I don't want to point to injuries because everyone's got them. And I don't want to point to the quarterback because that happens. I want to point to the entirety of the body of work of this organization over the last 4 years, and it stinks. So the new person who wasn't a part of all this needs to be the one to fix it. And they can decide what they think of Derek Carr. And they can decide what they think of Spencer Rattler. And they can decide who they think should be drafted. That's what needs to happen. That's the pushing off point for this entire deal. We will take the next week to assess candidates as they become reported. You've got a lot of the league that just finished their season. And as the weeks go on, 1-2 weeks, you're going to have very, very few coaches that are still working. And the groundwork should have been laid on this for months. You fired Dennis Allen after you lost at the Panthers at the beginning of November. He was let go November the 4th. It is now January the 6th. You have had 2 months to get this list together. So there should be a system in place, names on that list, interviews being conducted when that time comes, and the hire made with some efficiency here, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I don't know why I would trust him at this point, but with some efficiency. And at that point, I'll start to talk about this guy and that guy and that guy, and that's when we'll get to it. But I think the most important thing to get to, as we now are in the offseason and can comfortably talk about where this organization goes going forward, it needs to be on the back of the next guy who's the head coach of the Saints. Whether or not that's going to happen, I don't have any idea. My confidence level, kind of low. But it's the way that I feel it should be done. And we'll see. We'll have press conferences. Darren Rizzy meeting with the media today. And then we'll hear from the Saints brass as time goes on. But really, that's the key here, is only time is going to tell. But thankfully, it's all in the rearview mirror. And an organization that is stuck with continuity and stuck with the same same people and same processes needs to blow that whole thing up. And this has to be evidence of that. Saints will pick 9th in the upcoming draft. That draft, pretty important. Hey, it's Hunt. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.